There are things we say out loud and things we keep to ourselves.
In the Philippines, mental health often exists in the in between. Not because it is absent, but because we have been taught, quietly and for a very long time, to be afraid of it.
In our minds, why does asking for help feel so wrong in the first place?
This is not only a story about mental illness, but rather the story of how we understand it, about the institutions we imagine, the psychiatrists, hospitals, therapy rooms, and what we've been shaped to feel about them, and the language we use when someone says, hindi ko na kaya.
We ask people one simple question.
Okay, so the first thing I think about when I hear the word psychiatrist is a person who provides diagnosis.
When I first think of psychiatrist, I think help.
I think the first thing that comes to my mind when I hear the word asylum is yung parang kulungan ng mga baliw na you only go there if you have a really bad mental problem or you're just downright crazy. So yung mga, let's say, for example, kagaya ni Nasisa, ganon. So, syempre, for me, there's that fear, like, oh my god, I would not want to go there, nor would I want to be sent there, because going there would be equivalent to be like going to prison, essentially.
A psychiatrist? Isn't that a doctor for crazy people?
For me, the first thing that comes to mind is probably the social stigma that comes along with seeing one.
When I hear the word asylum, I immediately think of two different things. On one hand, it's supposed to mean a sanctuary or a safe place for people who need protection. But on the other hand, it has a really heavy negative history because of how we use the treat mental health. It makes me think of old, isolated institution where people were hidden away from society instead of being helped. The biggest negative to it is the feeling of losing your freedom. It sounds like a place where you're just a patient rather than a person, and where your own choices don't matter anymore. It's ironic because the word is meant to mean safety, but it often feels like it's more about confinement and being separated from the world. And even today, whether we're talking about mental health or people seeking refuge, the word still carries that weight of being labeled or kept at a distance rather than actually being supported.
These answers are not unusual. Much of this perception comes from how mental health institutions are often imagined as places of confinement rather than care. The words psychiatric hospital and asylum have been shaped more by media and fear than by actual understanding of treatment. Through jokes, through portrayals, through silence, these institutions begin to define what mental health means and what it does not.
Perception shapes behavior. If we believe that psychiatrists are only for the baliw, the severely, visibly unwell, then we will wait. We will minimize. We will tell ourselves, hindi pa ako ganun.
And in that waiting, a lot can be lost.
May maniniwala ba sa'yo, baliw ka?
So where does this fear come from?
I think part of it is family. We we know kasi how Filipino families or Filipino households in general are built on love and sacrifice. And part of the problem is the fact that we have no language for expressing mental suffering. Pain is something na you have to endure alone. emotional well-being is something that you have to deal with privately, and to express these things, to say something such as hindi ko na kaya, is seen as being a burden to the family. It is seen as being weak.
For me, it's the media. For decades, Filipino TV and film, even the ones from international movies like The Invisible Man, where the main character has been sent to a psychiatric hospital after being deemed mentally unstable, portrays mental illness as some sort of spectacle, like a chained figure. The violent outbursts the character played just for laughs. These portrayals tell us that what mental illness looks like, and it looks like someone we're afraid to become.
Well, historically, mental illness kasi diba was often associated with isolation in institutions, which were parang portrayed as designated places for those who were beyond normal. And even today, no, these early traditional ideas still influence how people react to the thought of seeing psychiatric help. And ayun, parang when you think of Filipinos, you think of the value na we're deeply proud of, yung lakas ng loob, resilience, strength of heart. Part of it is the Filipino capacity to smile through suffering.
These are not bad values, but when they become the only acceptable response to pain, when resilience means silence, they stop being strength. They become a wall between a person and the help they need. We grew up hearing these and we believed them because the people who said them loved us. But love without awareness can sometimes blur the line between care and silence.
But the silence is not only in our heads, nor is it caused by stigma. It is built into the system. The Philippines has one of the lowest psychiatrist to population ratios in the world. Outside Metro Manila, access becomes even more limited. In many provinces, there is no mental health professional within reach. Not one. This means that for many Filipinos, seeking help is not just a personal decision, it is a matter of availability, of distance, of whether care exists at all.
For someone earning minimum wage, one private therapy session is not a weekly option. It is barely a yearly one. For most Filipinos, the math simply doesn't work. And when care becomes a financial risk, many are forced to weigh their mental health against daily survival.
In 2018, the Philippines passed the Mental Health Act, a law that promised to integrate mental health into the public health system, protect patients' rights, and make care accessible to all. For the first time, mental health was recognized not just as a personal issue, but as a national responsibility.
It was the beginning, but years later, implementation remains incomplete. Community-based programs are underfunded. Field health coverage for mental health services is limited. In many areas, the promised services remain unavailable, leaving communities to navigate mental health without consistent support. The law exists, but for many Filipinos, its promises have not yet arrived at their door.
The fear we feel about mental health did not come from nowhere. It was shaped by a culture that said, be strong, and a system that made access to care difficult, uneven, and often out of reach. And when care feels distant, fear is reinforced.
And so, people wait.
I thought I could still manage.
I'm ashamed. What if they say I was just being dramatic?
I looked for a therapist. I waited 3 months. I never went back.
Now, these aren't dramatic stories. They're ordinary ones, and because they're ordinary, they often go unnoticed. A student who stopped attending class may not be because she was lazy, but because she could not get out of bed and didn't know why. A young man who finally told his family was not okay and was told to pray harder. A woman who searched for help, found it too far and too expensive, and decided she must not be sick enough to deserve it.
The delay is not a weakness. It is the logical outcome of everything we have been taught and everything the system has failed to provide. It's what happens when care is uncertain, distant, or out of reach. But something is changing. Think about how we treat physical illnesses. If someone breaks their arm, we do not tell them to pray for it to become better. We do not tell them to become stronger. We bring them to a doctor. We help them heal. Mental illness isn't any different. The brain is an organ. It can struggle. It can need care. And asking for that care is not a weakness. It is exactly what we would do for any other part of the body. Conditions like diabetes shows us that long-term care is not unusual in medicine. Mental health works the same way. Many conditions are manageable with continuous support, therapy, and when needed, medication. The difference is not in severity, but in how society chooses to view them.
Research tells us that early intervention, reaching people before a crisis, dramatically improves outcomes. The longer we wait, shaped by stigma and inaccessibility, the harder recovery becomes. This is not a moral failing, it is a public health reality.
And slowly, people are beginning to say so out loud. Young Filipinos are talking about mental health in ways their parents' generation could not. Universities are building counseling centers. Advocates are creating online spaces not just for attention but for support and for survival. Saying to strangers, hindi ka nag-iisa.
Organizations like Hopeline Philippines and Mind Nation have built what the system has not yet provided. Spaces where someone can say, hindi ko kaya, and be met not with judgment but with presence. This is not the resilience of suffering in silence. This is the resilience of the people who refuse to let each other disappear into silence.
We did not make this documentary because the problem is solved.
The gap is still wide.
The silence is still heavy.
And there are still people right now in the city, in this school, or maybe in this room carrying things that they have not yet found the words for. We made this because we are students being formed to see, and we wanted to turn that seeing towards something real. Because mahirap magpakatao. It is hard to be fully human, and a part of what makes it hard is that we are so rarely given permission to struggle out loud.
Mental health is not a luxury, nor is it a weakness. It is part of what it means to be human, and every person deserves the space and the support to tend to it.
Sa isip mo, naririto ka, at hindi mo kailangan manatili roon na nag-iisa.